All right, so this is, my name is Andrew Himes, and I'm the Director of Collective Impact for the Carbon Leadership Forum. So welcome to all of you to the NGO Roundtable for Embodied Carbon. Actually, we're calling it the NGO Government Roundtable for on embodied carbon, because a good number of governmental organizations or agencies have joined over the last year. We want to be inclusive. And so thank you very much for being here this morning. The NGO Government Roundtable has the following objectives. We want to share news, strategic plans, resources, and tools related to embodied carbon or the reduction of embodied carbon. We want to report planning and future dates for conferences, webinars, meetings. We want to inspire and facilitate ongoing communication and conversation among key leaders related to embodied carbon. And finally, we want to encourage convergence on shared carbon or embodied carbon terminology, data standards, benchmarks, and targets for embodied carbon reduction. So these meetings are typically they're 90-minute meetings, and we typically have a large number of relatively short reports from a good number of organizations, all of which are directly involved in this movement to decarbonize the built environment. So we want to do a great job of representing this diverse and growing community of interested and active folks and organizations, and also encourage people to connect with each other. So in the wake of this meeting, of course, we'll be providing meeting notes and the recorded video of the meeting on the CLF community website, and I'll be sending out a link to that after the meeting as soon as we get that done. And we'd like to make sure, first of all, if you wouldn't mind doing two things for us. One is in the chat window, please add your name and the organization that you're representing to the chat window to introduce yourself to everybody else. And secondly, as you give your short report, if you've got a link or a document or something or a set of even short set of slides that you'd like to share with others, please put the link to that resource in the chat window as well. So with no further ado, thank you very much again for attending. And I'd like to call on Ankita Gangotra from WRI to give our first short report.
Thanks, Andrew, as always, for accommodating me in my time zone. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you great.
I'm still temporarily based in India, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ankita Gangotra. I'm an associate on the Industrial Innovation Team as part of WRI's climate program. And today I've got a couple of quick updates for you and a question as well, if that's allowed, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. The first update is that WRI, we're drafting an article comparing the different approaches at the intersection of climate and trade policies to advance industrial decarbonization. In this article, we're basically looking to discuss the idea of a low carbon product standard, something that WRI had worked on a couple of years ago, along with new legislative proposals in the US on border carbon adjustments. I can share our working papers on the low carbon product standards from a couple of years ago in the chat shortly, and the article itself should be out soon, so I can share it at the next roundtable. The second update is that we're working on developing a US international knowledge exchange forum on green steel and cement. This is to facilitate sharing on the latest developments between international initiatives and the US policymaking communities on green procurement and low carbon standards for construction materials, and we're beginning with green steel, cement, and concrete. I'll share more on this next time, but in the meanwhile, if anyone's interested in joining or something like this, please don't hesitate to contact me. And my question is anyone in this group engaging in the California legislation, AB 43? I believe last year it was called AB 2446, and it would require the establishment of a trading system for building materials. And if you are engaging in this, would you be willing to share your thoughts on it? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Ankita. You could, in response, you could ask a question or a response to Ankita either right here in the chat, in the call immediately, or you could put your question in the chat window and see answers to it there. And we can always follow up by connecting you, Ankita, with anybody who's got a response or something to add.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So Graham Wright from the Passive House Institute of the U.S. Would you please go ahead now? And you're muted.
Of course, I'm muted. Okay.
There you go. Got it.
All right. Thank you. So FIA's vision is that every building supports the health of people and the planet. And planet-wise, our current criteria for building project certification are focused on low heating and cooling loads and low source energy use in operation. With respect to carbon, I have proposed that the ideal is not net zero, but absolute zero, that no emissions ever occur anywhere in the supply chain or in the operating life of the building. This extends what's now being called 24/7 zero for building operation into all the supply chain operations as well. And the idea or proposal there is that the building sector just doesn't get to use offsets and instead avoids emissions in the first place. So in the context of our new retrofit program that we're working on, we devised a full cost accounted life cycle cost metric that's sensitive to both operational and embodied emissions. It then applies a carbon price to the emissions and adds them to the direct construction cost and the operational cost and the electrification cost. Idea is that you then minimize that total cost, and effectively we're asking people to design as if there's a carbon tax, and rather than setting a net zero target and worry about what's a valid offset, we're asking people just to see how low they can go without offsets. This does put us in the position of having to do benchmarking before setting any hard targets. But we back that up by some very hard targets on thermal resilience of the building, which drives most of the envelope design. As to the calculation of the embodied emissions themselves, our proposed framework has a first approximation level that's just based on the cost of the item and the carbon intensity of the economy in the country of origin. That's called the economic input-output model. There is a second level calculation you can do where specific credits for avoided carbon can be recognized for better than usual choices of materials, business processes, or personal lifestyle choices. This framework is compatible with multiple data sources about the embodied emissions of materials. I do want to voice a particular concern about the carbon emissions accounting for wood. I don't think this should extend indefinitely into the past, to take credit for carbon sequestration that the trees did like decades ago. At the recent ASHRAE meeting in Tampa, I attended a talk by Heather Getch from NREL about the carbon impacts of cross-laminated timber. And in their study, they started the carbon accounting clock at harvest time, and I agree with that. So a couple of other little points. We have entered into a cooperative research and development agreement, a CRADA, with Oak Ridge National Laboratory to measure the air tightness, thermal, and moisture properties of some bio-based and low embodied energy materials, building materials, so that assemblies made out of them can be analyzed for moisture risk in WWOOFie. And lastly, our volunteer tech committee has discussed the issue of refrigerants, but so far we've not adopted any hard and fast rules around that. And that's my report.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Graham. And next, I think we have Kara Kokernak from ULI. Go right ahead, Kara.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me and listening today. I've got two updates to really focus on. I think I've mentioned these a couple times in the previous months, but ULI and our Greenprint Community of Practice team is currently collecting embodied carbon data for the first time for our annual performance reports. We have received one submission so far that actually has quite substantial embodied carbon data, but the final data deadline is August 1st. So we anticipate quite a few more coming in, and we'll have a lot more to report on the next call. When we do publish our report, it will include that data as well as embodied carbon case studies. So that's sort of a keep a lookout for. The other item I wanted to mention that I think I've previously mentioned, we are currently planning our second embodied carbon convening. Our first one was back in January, where we brought executives from the construction and developer industries together. And in the second convening, which we are holding in September, we are inviting construction executives, developers, and the green concrete cement suppliers, green steel supplier fields. So definitely would like to touch base with you, Ankita, about what your process is for your meeting. And if you have any great leads for those industries, we do have quite a few people already committed to attend, but we are looking for contacts in the concrete and cement and steel industry. So if you have any ideas or leads, please let us know. We've already gotten a few contacts from other folks on the call, so we really appreciate that collaboration and help. I will drop some information about the convening in the chat, and we will have more to update on the next call, but really excited to see momentum on a couple of our projects moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara. And next on our agenda is James Kitchen from the Mass Design Group. And welcome, James. Glad you're here. And please go right ahead.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I have a few slides. I'll just share. I think it's still loading. Anyway, whilst it's still loading, I'm just going to give an update on some of the research that we're doing in our US-based portfolio and also like our Rwanda portfolio. So in the US, like most design firms, we reinvent the wheel every time we look at envelopes. So we picked 9 typical envelopes that we look at or we use on some of our projects. And we're basically identifying the embodied carbon and the operational carbon emissions that like associated with those envelopes, but also now sort of, and that's something that we typically do, but now we're working with Stuart Lynn to actually introduce like whole life cost into that as well, because one of the main drivers that we've seen from our non-profit clients that we work with is cost. And if you can convince someone that it's cost effective, then it's very easy to implement. So we look at this, for instance, this graph is just looking at like one envelope, but what happens if you change it from like a high thermal performance to a lower thermal performance, for instance, in New York, and it's an all-electric building, and you can kind of see here that there's 2 lines that follow, like the higher thermal performing envelope has a higher initial embodied carbon, for instance, but over time, eventually, after like 30 plus years, you start to actually see that these envelopes cross the whole life carbon of these envelopes cross. And we want to add on to this, like what happens to the whole life cost of this graph? Like, does that ever cross, for instance? Do you actually save money, or what's the time payback for using a higher thermal performing envelope in different geographies? And you can see the dotted lines below are showing a decarbonization scenario that by 2050, if the grid decarbonizes, like these envelopes, the higher thermal performing envelope never crosses. So this is like sort of how we make decisions on design projects in related to carbon and the exterior of our buildings. But we're like embarking on this research project to study what influence does geography have on this, what influence does the window to wall ratio have, what influence does the building and product service life have, grid decarbonization, and also biogenic materials. Also, if anybody can get me on to a PCR panel discussion about biogenic materials, I would love to join that. And in Rwanda, where we do a lot of our work, and I do a lot of the embodied carbon research projects work there for a couple of years now. We've been working with Harrop, Field and Clegg Bradley and the University of Rwanda on a grant to study, measure and reduce the embodied carbon in Rwanda. And so we completed a first year of funding for that. And the second year we're doing is focused on a couple of interesting things. First of all, we're introducing cooling systems and refrigerant into the tool. We're seeing that a lot of buildings that are being built now in Rwanda are increasing the amount of refrigerant, like their cooling systems, when actually it's an incredibly pleasant climate. You could design a lot of them with natural ventilation and cooling. A lot of them are getting air conditioning units, and we want to just highlight the impact of that. It's also a case where a lot of manufacturers are pushing the refrigerants that are no longer permitted in Europe into Africa. So some of the higher emitting refrigerants. So we're trying to highlight that impact too. This project example here, for instance, is like, this project only has 15% of the building is cooled. And you can already see that you're getting something like 200 kilograms per meter squared of impact of embodied carbon based on the refrigerants and the cooling of that building. So it's a huge impact, as you can see. And then the other success on this project, on this research project, is getting 3 manufacturers to agree to do EPDs or create EPDs in Rwanda. This was a lot of persuasion required for this, but the good things are that EPDs are not as expensive as they used to be. We've got quotes for $3,000 per, or 3,000 euros per EPD for a cement EPD. And I think the key to this was getting the government on board and basically trying to say that the EPDs align with every initiative that they're trying to push, such as like their commitment to environmental transparency, their national determined contributions, their made in Rwanda policy, which encourages local manufacturing, and a bunch of other things, and just saying that EPDs support this. And then once the government was on board, it was very easy to convince some key manufacturers to do it as well. So that is my update. And I'll share more in future months.
Great, thank you so much, James. And I'd love to individually follow up with you as well. We had a really an excellent meeting of the launch of a Kenyan regional hub of the Carbon Leadership Forum, with a whole lot of folks from various governmental agencies and NGOs attending, and there are obviously a lot of the similar challenges in those countries. It would probably be really valuable to connect the two efforts and to have an ongoing conversation between groups of people. So I'll follow up with you after the meeting. Thank you very much, James. And then, of course, thank you very much also for Shana Stott being here from the city of Toronto. And if I'm not mistaken, Shana, we've got some really great news to report from your city.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I know Ryan Zizzo, who's been a consultant who's done a lot of work, and Kelly Doran, who've done a lot of work on our City of Toronto projects, are typically participants in this group. So I'm just going to share a couple slides for a moment. And one moment here. I'm sorry. Too many screens.
Got it.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, perfect. Let me just do this. Okay, so I wanted to talk to kind of update you on some changes that have happened under the umbrella of the City of Toronto's Green Building Standards. So just quickly, and I did share the link in the chat to our version 4 of our Green Building Standards. So these are requirements, tiered set of requirements that are applied to new private sector development in the City of Toronto through the planning approval process, as well as our own facilities. So in 2021, we introduced version 4 of the Toronto Green Standard, which included for the first time requirements for city facilities related to reporting and documenting embodied carbon, and as well as for our voluntary tiers of performance that the city incentivizes, requirements around similarly undertaking the life cycle assessments for projects pursuing any of our incentive programs. In subsequent to that report, the standards came into effect on May 1st, 2022. We did complete 2 benchmarking studies for the City of Toronto, one on large buildings and then the other on small buildings in partnership with Mantle and the Half Studio, as well as Builders for Climate Action here in Ontario. And those studies were really instrumental in allowing the City of Toronto to report on and have approved by council mandatory embodied carbon caps for our own city facilities. So now City of Toronto facilities, and this is just kind of some drafts, some text, but it's all available on our website. So establish these carbon emissions or embodied carbon caps for city projects, and this extends to so it includes non-residential projects such as community centers, EMS facilities, fire stations, but also any projects that the city undertakes for housing. So we have our public housing providers, as well as a lot of work the city does in terms of releasing its lands for housing development to help address a number of the housing pressures in the city. So it's really the requirement for city facilities has quite broad scope. So this is a really exciting step forward for the City of Toronto. There's also a higher performance requirement, and really that was based on, as part of the benchmarking work, a number of we have a net zero emissions requirement for our own city facilities that came in at the beginning of May 2022. So we started to see where city facilities were falling in terms of their embodied carbon emissions, and that we had the ability to make very late stage. So here's an example of a project where just before tender, material substitutions were made based on the analysis. So we were able to kind of from our capital project perspective, say that there is a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be captured even for projects that are well advanced, but now we're introducing it at really the upfront of the design and procurement stage. So it's really exciting news, and we're taking some additional steps now, building off of that work, those 2 benchmarking studies. There were a number of recommendations that came forward, and we have a phase 2 study that's just kicking off this month, and that includes, it's really, sorry, I pulled the slide together rather quickly. It's called a Municipal Embodied Carbon Toolkit project, and it's aimed at developing recommendations for municipalities across Ontario on how to address embodied carbon through a number of different streams, including a review of our urban design guidelines, our major typological guidelines in the City of Toronto. So applying a embodied carbon lens to understand how our urban design requirements for step backs, below grade structures, impact the embodied carbon of a project, and to deliver recommendations on that front. We're doing a review of our procurement policies, so including developing a template or an assessment tool for divisions that procure a large volume of material. So how are we going to embed embodied carbon into our citywide procurement approach? And then we're doing a review of demolition, renovation, reconstruction policies, the various levers that we have in terms of fees, and trying to identify all of our tools to support building retention and building material reuse. So that's just kicking off, and hopefully we'll have outcomes from that piece in by this time next year. And so I will stop sharing. And I have shared the links in the chat to the Toronto Green Standard, and if you have any detailed questions on the TGS, you can always send me an email. I'm happy to chat.
Thank you so much, Shana. That was a fantastic report. Very encouraging. All the stuff that's happening in your fair city. And now I'd like to call on Tracy Wynn from RMI. And you got the mic there, Tracy. Go ahead.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, I'm Tracy. I'm with RMI. We're a nonprofit focused on decarbonization of the global economy. So we're pretty big, but I'm focused on the buildings team and specifically the embodied carbon team. So I've got 4 main updates for the team today, one of which is an embodied carbon and ESG primer. So this is an insight brief summarizing how embodied carbon fits into the entire ESG reporting landscape, specifically focused on the real estate sector. So it'll be a web article that we'll be publishing soon. So I can't provide the link today, but hopefully by next meeting I can. And it'll cover topics like what the scope 3 investor landscape looks like at the moment, how embodied carbon is addressed in ESG currently, and also the path to zero and science-based targets. Again, focusing on the real estate and development sector. The second update I have is the good news of approval to pursue the development of an ANSI or ResNet standard to measure embodied carbon in the low-rise residential sector. So the past few updates have been, we're still waiting for them to vote, but they finally did. So right now we're actually seeking members for the technical committee. So if anyone is particularly interested in fleshing out the technical aspects of the embodied carbon measuring standard for low-rise residential, please get in touch. But otherwise, our next step is to organize that first technical working group meeting and just speed this standard along, because we know that the review and revisions process takes quite some time. So we're trying to speed this one along as soon as we can. Third update is on the in parallel development with the ResNet standard, the Home Builders Climate Commitment Program. We've had several stakeholder meetings already this year to introduce what the program could look like, its core principles, how it's structured, and so on. And the purpose of this program is to support the home building sector in how to report on embodied emissions and also how to reduce them. So the core of it is simply a reporting framework and guidance. And what the commitment program looks like into the future is something we're still in the progress of defining, but in essence, we're just addressing the gap and a need in the industry to be able to have a streamlined way of reporting it. And the idea is that ResNet ANSI standard is going to underpin this program by providing the standard for which these participants can calculate their embodied emissions. So we're currently refining at the stage of building out the actual details of the program and building out our communication strategy. And our next step is a soft launch at the EBA conference in later this year in October. So we'll have a booth there. If anyone's going to be there, please drop by and say hi. But that's where we're going to be introducing a more fleshed out version of what the program could look like, with the idea of doing a formal launch early next year. And the fourth update, a really exciting one, is a publication currently in development. We're calling, or with the theme of driving action on embodied carbon. So this is a synthesis of our current understanding of embodied carbon a day, but specifically to answer key questions to unblock barriers and make sure that people can actually act on embodied carbon. And this is with collaboration with USGBC. And Wes, I think I saw your name on the attendees list, so I wanted to share the mic with you in case you wanted to speak to this project.
Thanks, Tracy. That's great. Yeah, I'm Wes with the lead team at USGBC. And we're really excited about this project. It's trying to go beyond 101 and kind of get a lot of this research that we all are doing and everyone's doing in this industry together and to guide some best practices. And importantly, this will help inform the version of LEED that we're working on right now, which is LEED version 5, to be released later this year. So when this report comes out in a couple months, you'll see some connections to the LEED rating system and a deeper dive on embodied carbon as well. And we're hoping to release this right around the time of Greenbuild, which is our conference happening in September in Washington, D.C. at the end of September. And we've got a session there on this. So please, if you're in town, check it out. And we're really excited about this work. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. I'm really excited about it too. So those are the 4 main updates. There are some things in the pipeline, for example, developing some more work on creating or synthesizing market incentives for the real estate sector, again, kind of in related to that ESG primer that I spoke about. And then in soon on the horizon is a publication on some case studies that we were looking at for low embodied carbon and cost. And then, of course, a continuation of some state DOT workshop series on procuring low carbon materials. So I don't have any links to share this time around, but hopefully by the next meeting, I'll be able to share some more in the chat. And thanks, Andrew. I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thank you. And if you feel okay about it, just providing us with a link to the slides that you just showed would be really helpful. And I want to attend that panel discussion on Greenbuild for sure. I want to hear more about, or I want to see that driving action paper when you release it. And finally, I'm really excited about the Home Builders Commitment Program. Just a couple of days ago, I had a great conversation with Chris Magwood, who told me all about it. And I think it's really exciting. So then I think the next on our agenda is Dorian Bailey from the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey. Go right ahead, Dorian.
All righty. Good to see you. I hope everybody's doing well. My name is Dorian Bailey. I am the Chief of Clean Construction at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and I have been working on an embodied carbon strategy for our agency for the past 3 or 4 years. What's unique about the Port Authority is that we are not just pursuing this on the design side of life. As I mentioned, I'm in the construction side. So as we're going forward and trying to track our embodied carbon and other ancillary EPD type metrics, we're aggregating all of our data into a centralized carbon data management system, which really helps us keep track on a project by project basis as to the impacts from our construction programs. So my updates are, number one, that we did receive a technical support grant from Federal Highway Administrations per their climate challenge work that was posted last year. I think it was about a year ago. So we are working very closely with folks over at Federal Highways on our like linear construction work. The other thing, we recently had a press release indicating that the Port Authority has finally come through with codifying our low carbon concrete specs. I'm just going to see if I can share a screen. So these are what we consider the A1 limits for the GWP values for our concrete mixes. Again, this is strictly drawing off the discrete mix designs of the concrete pours that we're getting. One of the unique things about the Port Authority is that we are using a lot of high replacement rate for alternative cementitious materials, things like slag, fly ash. We're also entertaining ground glass pozzolans. So we did put out a new specification that now gives us some driving mechanism with our contractors to really make sure that they are meeting lower concrete embodied CO2 standards. So I did not prepare a presentation, but we can certainly share the specification if anybody has interest. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dorian. And next on my list is Ken Levinson from the Passive House Network. Go right ahead, Ken.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. It's good to be here again. Let me share my screen briefly. So those of you who may not be familiar, we are not a standard setting organization. We work with the Passive House Institute around the international passive house standards, but we do a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of training, a lot of capacity building, working with passive house practitioners of all stripes across the US and with groups around the world. There's a lot going on. I just want to say of all this that I'm throwing at you is just 3 things, I think. One, I wanted to note that yesterday we actually had Chris Magwood on talking about the report on residential construction and the embodied carbon impact. And it was great. It's always good to have Chris in dialogue. We had 60 plus serious, active professionals working, taking this in and being able to put it into action. I say that only to encourage, and hopefully we can connect where others are having reports or news information. We would be very happy to host and help you spread the word for what you're doing. In addition to that, I'll jump to point 6, our conference at the end of September, beginning of October, will be in person in Denver. And not to overload with Chris, but we're very happy to have him join a panel discussion. There will be a number of sessions around passive house and embodied carbon. The passive house community, and I think as Graham indicated earlier on in this meeting, is very interested in supporting low embodied carbon solutions. And then finally here, the pH ribbon, which is our embodied carbon calculating tool. It was released last year. We've done it in collaboration with the AECB, which is a UK outfit, but also with Building Transparency and using the EC3 database, plus a number of other tweaks. The PHPP, which runs the passive house energy model, holds this pH ribbon calculator. So you can calculate the operational embodied carbon, the operational emissions, excuse me, along with the embodied carbon over the life cycle of the building. And the news there is that the PHPP was just recently updated, and along with that, the pH ribbon is being updated. A lot more data sheets and a lot more power behind it. So encourage everyone to check that out. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Ken. Chris Magwood seems to be popping up everywhere these days, like mushrooms over after a rain. Next on my list is Luke Leung. Luke, would you please give us an update on the MEP 2040 commitment?
Sure. There are 4 things I want to update you. Number 1 is we're getting married.
Yay!
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah. MEP 2040 is marrying into ASHRAE. There will be no wedding reception, but if you want to send gifts, I'll be happy to take them. Number 2, TM65 is 60% in common. So if you're looking for like average data of transportation, like for A4 and A5, average data for train transport, truck transport, and the emission data is in there. It also has background material of common copper steel in US, so like a couple pages long. So if you're looking for those information, it will be in the TM65 draft that's out for comment for 60%. Number 3 is MEP 2040 is trying to work with multiple organizations, including, well, maybe I shouldn't mention them, it's too many, to come up with a holistic building schema to report embodied carbon. We are focusing on the MEP side. So if you have any comments, suggestions, feel free to forward to me. What are the data points in MEP equipment we should include? Some interesting discussion, including, is it one size fits all, including LCA of a building? So the 200-meter tall building, LCA is 60 years or 100 years? How about a one-story retail? So any comments are welcome on the schema of MEP. And number 4 is this, we thought it's interesting that World Green Building Council issued this report on 2050, not whole life carbon zero, but a net zero of resources on the earth, like a complete circular economy by 2050. Otherwise, how do we address embodied carbon? So we're looking into that report and thought that might be something there to address a holistic circular economy of no more depletion of the earth resources in order to get to an embodied carbon zero. So those are the 4 things. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Luke, and congratulations on the nuptials. I'm also, along with Luke and a number of other folks, part of the steering committee for MEP 2040, and it's really exciting that ASHRAE's decided to not only to endorse the MEP 2040 initiative or challenge or commitment, but also to actually contribute staff resources and time and organizational heft and power to advocating for that commitment and making sure that things begin to really happen in a much bigger way even. So we're really happy about that. Lauren Alger is on the call here, and Lauren, I'm going to ambush you. I didn't have you listed as a speaker, but would you mind telling us a little bit about Infrastructure 2050?
Absolutely. Yeah, so if everyone's familiar with SC 2050, which focuses on buildings, we launched alongside ASCE Infrastructure 2050, focused on all the other infrastructure projects and also considering beyond just structural engineers. So how are we accounting for civil engineers? How are we accounting for, a whole range of utility, water specific, you name it. So right now we're kind of in this phase of evaluating tunnel projects. The first step is establishing a draft framework that we can use for data collection. And then we're currently in the phase of, now that we have a draft framework of how to analyze tunnel projects, what are the projects that we're going to begin looking at and determining if we need to refine that data collection framework in some way. Additionally, we have focus groups for bridges, and we're starting a focus group primarily with airports with a focus on runways, but also we're going to start up roadways and runways combined, I believe. And then we're also going to expand to include ports in general. And then I think we're going to soon expand into utilities. So we have a lot of things going on all at once, but all surrounding infrastructure projects. And the future program vision is really to help develop policies with government agencies to gather more data to analyze it and determine safe and effective carbon reduction strategies for infrastructure projects.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lauren. I appreciate you stepping in there. And it's great to hear all of that action going on. We're also, from CLF's point of view, excited about your project, partly because we've been doing a lot of original work ourselves, research on the decarbonization of infrastructure in Washington State, which was an initiative partly funded by the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, along with probably 20 other states where that kind of work is going on. So we're really, really happy that Infrastructure 2050 is part of the recipe and part of the movement. And Marnese Jackson from the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, I'm delighted to see you this morning. And would you please tell us what's MBDC up to these days?
Well, thank you. So Midwest BDC, we're into more coalition building and bringing more people on and structuring the coalition. It's summertime, so things kind of die down, but we're ramping back up for the fall season. We have our equity summit coming up in November. We do actually have a coalition meeting today if anybody would like to attend just to see what's going on. But we have our new grant funding cycle where we redistribute money to communities by taking that Climate Funders Justice Pledge and Justice 40 Pledge. And so we are gearing up for that. So if you know any communities who will benefit impacted communities, I could put the link in the chat for people to apply for that. And for those who are even new to coalition or our coalition, we have a participation stipend for those who are new to Midwest BDC and can come in and participate, learn what we're doing, get involved with our different working groups, because we have a lot. And then we have a lot of trainings that's coming up for August, and I will put those in the chat. So we have a lot coming up in the fall. We have our Black August or Black Liberation trainings that's coming up in August. That's centered around climate justice 101, ecofeminism, eco-womanism, undoing implicit bias and building decarbonization, and undoing white supremacy culture and building decarbonization. So here are the links to those, and those are free. People are welcome to come to those. I mean, our coalition is free, so all is welcome. And it's a good opportunity to learn and relearn some things that we may have experienced or may not know that we're doing. And then in the fall, like I said, we have our Equity Summit in November. We're going to be having a clergy roundtable and what it means for interfaiths, all houses of worship, to get involved with building decarbonization, do audits on their churches, and of course bring members of their houses of worship into the sector of building decarbonization. And then we have our youth podcast series that's focused on youth and climate, careers in the building sciences, and also youth and indoor air quality. So we're trying to bring more youth into building decarbonization, because we know that they will be inheriting the earth. And then this is an opportunity to understand the different sectors or the different fields that they can get into. So if you all are interested in any of that, you can email me. And I think that's all we have going on.
Wow, Marnice.
And I feel like,
my God.
I feel like we got some policy stuff going on, but I forgot to get briefed on all that. So, but yes, connect me and I will connect you to Jacob or whomever, because we're a coalition. We have a lot of people within our coalitional spaces. So I will put all that in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. Frankly, what you have to add is just incredibly inspirational, especially about the youth programs. I'm just really delighted to hear about your work. So next on our agenda, I've got, oh, by the way, Allison Ken-Bennett from the EPA. I didn't have you on the list for speakers, but I saw the note that you put in the chat window. Allison, would you mind telling us, just spend about 2 minutes to tell us a little bit more about what's happening at the EPA? You guys are the center of attention these days.
Thank you, Andrew. And I know we've shared as much as we were able to in previous roundtables, and are hoping to be able to share a lot more. I guess I wanted to mostly say thank you, everyone that spent time to share your feedback with us. We had an open request for information on 32 very in-depth questions in helping us shape and launch our IRA programs, a $250 million EPD assistance program, and a new carbon labeling program. So we're really enjoying and appreciative and digesting still, and hope to have more to announce. But on the hiring front, yes, we are growing by leaps and bounds to bring in the needed expertise. These next opportunities are not going to be widely promoted, just within those circles of highly qualified candidates in the embodied carbon and BioClean space. And these positions are not, at least in these near-term openings, are not going to go as permanent federal government employee positions. So if you're thinking about maybe a 2 to 4 year gig to help us launch, please do let me know, and I can share with you those links when they're available.
Fantastic.
That's all I have for now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Allison. It's really great to know about the real leadership taking place at the EPA, and I'm hoping that the work there that you're part of can continue, obviously, for years, and not just the next 2 to 4 years. So thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And we haven't had a chance really to prove our leadership in this space. We've been in that fun time of brainstorming and listening. It's going to be the next chapter is going to be these fun, tough decisions on how to roll these programs out and shape them. So please consider joining us.
All right. Thanks a lot. And next person on my list of speakers is actually someone I'm extremely proud to introduce, Lisa DeLude, who's the Director of Sustainability at the University of Washington, where the Carbon Leadership Forum, of course, is hosted. And I've been working with Lisa over the last year on something that she's going to tell you about right now.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. And yeah, Andrew and the CLF has been just an awesome partner in a lot of the different initiatives that we're working on at UW, at the University of Washington. So what the quick update I wanted to give is that we are updating our green building standard for UW, and I'll pull up some slides if I can really quick. Let's see. Also have too many screens open. Hold on a sec. Okay, is everybody seeing that?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so I would say that University of Washington is about 50% of the way through the process of updating our green building standard. Previously, our green building standard really only addressed new construction and really only addressed operational carbon. And so this will be the first time that we're addressing embodied carbon, yay. And we've added some different tiers on the left-hand side. So we're including partial renovations, system upgrades, and then non-energy projects. So what we're recommending, and we just had about a month ago, just had our embodied carbon focus group meeting, which Andrew and CLF folks have been a great part of and partner with. So we're planning to recommend the 46.45 kilograms CO2 per square foot. And I saw that Toronto, you had it in the metric system, so I'll compare, get in touch and compare notes, see how ours compare. We're also making sure that we're working throughout the process from soup to nuts for our different construction projects, renovation projects, to ensure that this gets, the targets are well known in the project definition phase. What else do I want to, I don't want to read all of it. That will definitely be boring for folks. But yeah, I think the main thing is that we're really trying to address embodied carbon throughout these different project types, categories, or tiers. We were initially thinking we'd have a separate category for clinical. And after a lot of discussion, I think everybody realized the standards should be the same. There's no reason why we can't do this in a clinical setting. I think the only other thing that's come up is as we're R1 research institution, so we have a lot of labs and lab space. And there's been some, in my opinion, not totally valid arguments that we also can't reduce embodied carbon in some of our lab and science buildings, chemical sciences in particular. So anyway, we're getting there. We're definitely getting folks on board. A lot of this is engagement and education, but would love to hear from all of you. If you have recommendations, things that we're missing, things that you think should be in our standard, I would love to connect with you and hear about that. Here are some of the other recommendations as an organization that we're considering. So adopting the GSA IRA embodied carbon standards in our facility design standards. We have done a little bit of studying of embodied carbon in our current buildings. Most of those are pretty recent building projects, which has been helpful, but we haven't really done a larger study, which would be great because part of the part of what we're going to put in the green building standard is we do not want to increase our net square footage of the campus. We actually have plenty of space across our campus. And obviously, if we don't need to build a new building, we'd rather renovate the space we have. That said, it would be great to do sort of a more holistic study of what we have in terms of building age and comparing renovation with building new. We're not planning to do carbon offsets. I know some of the other speakers provided an update on that, and I agree. We really want to try to reduce our carbon emissions, both operational and embodied, to the greatest extent possible. And we don't, as an organization, really feel like carbon offsets are that productive. I think if we did do something to offset carbon, it might be sort of an internal fee that we put towards addressing addressing embodied or operational carbon with our steam plant, for example, which heats the majority of our campus buildings. So anyway, that's a quick update. Thanks so much, Andrew, for the time. And again, love to get any input, insight from all of you on how we could make this standard better as we continue working on it. Thanks.
Great, and thank you, Lisa. By the way, the one of the wonderful things that's happened this year is that Lisa has had a student intern from the architecture department at the University of Washington, helping to develop research and then working together with Lisa and the Green Building Standards team to come up with the new set of standards. Lisa, Radha has been really great, and she developed an essay for the Carbon Leadership Forum website and newsletter to tell the story of the work that's been happening over the last year. And I just put a link in the chat window to Radha's story, which I thought was just really great. Next on our agenda, I'm really delighted that Megan Lewis could join us this morning, taking a little bit of time out from her overwhelming responsibilities as a mom. So, Megan, tell us a little bit about, first of all, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then tell us a little bit about a really extraordinary project that Megan has been working on, along with a number of the other organizations in this network that is just really inspirational and promising.
Oh, Andrew, I just realized we have so many projects that fall under the description of data and alignment that I was thinking about sharing about a different one. But
you could do both. You could do both.
Okay. All right. Good morning. I'm Megan Lewis. I'm a senior researcher at the CLF. So I get to hang out with Andrew a lot. Brooke Waldman's also on the call. He's been working with me on the other project that I was thinking about giving a preview of. In terms of the one that Andrew's referring to, we've been having conversations with the commitments, so SC 2050, maybe 2040, just like that, and also some of the rating systems. So ILFI and USGBC have been joining these conversations. I see Jessica on the call listening to me butcher this because I'm describing this ad hoc. But essentially, we've been meeting since the conversation started in January. We got together in person for the first time in March to really talk about opportunities to align more around embodied carbon, thinking specifically about reporting, as well as how we communicated about embodied carbon and the kinds of requirements that are in all these different programs in terms of how they're asking for data, as well as another really broad. So we started with this smaller conversation, and then it's really gotten quite broad. One of the first things we're working on is being led by building transparency. And I don't think I see them on the call today, but they're leading a conversation around coming up with a common reporting. They're calling a schema. So how you would submit data for projects, thinking really about if you did a whole building LCA and you want to submit project data, what that would look like. And so can we use the same language across all these different initiatives? So that's a little bit of an update on that. The thing I was going to share about is a report that we are going to hopefully publish in August. And this is, I'm going to call this a report preview, just super quickly share slides if I can, Andrew, I think. Yes, okay. We started working on this in January and was also influenced by our submission to the EPA RFI. So thank you, Allison and team, for asking lots of good questions. And we wanted to make sure that the work that went into that and our thinking could also be expanded to think about Project LCA and just captured in a way that's a little easier to share with NGOs like the ones on this call. So what we were thinking about is really that it feels like this unique moment where we're shifting from EPDs, other Project LCA, really LCA data is no longer a question of whether it's going to be used in policy, it just is. And the question is more around whether we can take advantage of this moment to strengthen that data ecosystem to maximize its potential as an effective tool for decarbonization and policy. And so in this report, what we did is we looked at, so about the first half is really on demystifying what the LCA data ecosystem is, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And then the second half is more of a roadmap for how we can improve it, again, with the end goal in mind of making it a more effective tool for policy. And one of the things we're trying to do throughout is shining a light on existing initiatives, because we really don't have time for redundancy. This is one of the things I love about this call that Andrew organizes, is just hearing what everyone's working on so that we can try to collaborate where it makes sense and move faster together. And a little note that this is we're really focusing on US and Canada in this report, but we do reference a lot of European standards and initiatives because they're often really helpful to think about as a comparison or case study, and then also because global harmonization is increasingly important. So the structure of this report, we really focus on 4 different areas for general or cross-sector LCA, which is the foundation for these other kinds of LCA. So as an architect or as a building owner, you might be thinking more about, oh, I want to ask an architect to do an LCA of my building to measure what the carbon footprint is, or I want to know what the footprint of this product is. But there's this whole system underlying that that is what makes these other pieces work well. And so we want to focus on all 4 of these. So sort of general cross-sector LCA, and background data and standards, and then products and EPDs, as well as buildings and roadways, thinking about more Project LCA. And so for each of those 4 areas, we really dive into what are the existing standards and guidelines, data sources, so foreground and background data, who typically collects it, where it comes from, what the typical tools are, as well as the main actors. And I'm just going to be quick. So the last thing I'll share is just sort of what the end goal of the solutions that are laid out in this report are. And I will mention many of you on this call and a lot of our network participated in virtual workshops that really influenced this. So in addition to one-on-one interviews and background research, we also hosted workshops with over 40 organizations to get their input on this roadmap, and that you'll see if you read this report. And really laying out how can we get to an LCA data ecosystem that is more open and transparent, more accessible, keeps pace with new materials, technologies, and processes. So really, if it's going to be a tool for decarbonization, then we have to fill some of the gaps that we have right now and what we can measure and report for policy. Building confidence in the comparability and reliability of the results of both product and Project LCA. And then really something that I used to feel very pie in the sky that's now coming, it feels in a shorter time frame as being more globally harmonized. So that was just a brief preview. So there's lots of nice diagrams where we talk about all the things that exist now, and then lay out some ideas about what could make this better and who could do it. So I will stop there. And again, we're going to publish that in August. And it would not have been possible without my excellent coworker, Brooke, who's also on this call. Very hi, Brooke. And I think that's it. We'll also have a public webinar on that, probably more in September, once everyone's back from holidays.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. And by the way, I put a link in the chat window to the announcement that was public back in April about the aligning and accelerating embodied carbon reporting. So you can take a look at that. And also, David Arkin is here also. He's been a significant part of that project, as well as a number of others over a period of years connected with the CLF. David, would you mind telling us a little bit more about the EC decarb alignment effort that you've been part of along with Megan, and how you see the AIA commitment connecting with it?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. Well, I added some notes in the chat. The AIA's 2030 commitment parallels Architecture 2030 and Ed Masria setting a path to carbon neutral buildings by the year 2030. And the AIA adopted this very early on. And buildings have been on a path of decarbonizing operating energy quite significantly, but in recent years, we've understood that embodied carbon is the real focus that we have to take on. And so we're pleased to be participating with SE 2050, ME 2050 infrastructure, ME 2040 infrastructure 2050, and landscape architects and others in this decarbonization alignment effort across industries. So just know that that work is ongoing. We currently have facilitation by Sarah and Building Green to help us find our collective alignment.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, David. And next on my list is Rachel Stern from the Cellulose Insulation Manufacturers Association. And if I'm not mistaken, this may be the first time that you've presented at one of these roundtable meetings. Is that right, Rachel? And so I'm delighted to have you here.
So yeah, thank you for the invitation, and I'm really enjoying hearing all of the updates that others have. It's pretty short right now on behalf of the Cellulose Insulation Manufacturers Association. We are doing the PCR update for the building thermal insulation. That's in progress right now. A few of the things that we're trying to include are the addition of bio-based to the applicable products list, inclusion of blowing agents or blowing agent emissions for foam products, and also mandating the disclosure of both biogenic and fossil carbon per the existing ISO guidelines. So that's pretty much the that process. And I know Brooke from CLF is partaking in that as well. So thank you for being an advocate, because we've got a lot of competing interests involved, and there's some folks that want to include like operational carbon, for example, and it's just, that's really hard to quantify. It's almost impossible, actually, when you're talking about an EPD. If it's a whole life or a whole building, LCA, then maybe that makes sense. But for the purpose of a product EPD, it really doesn't. And interesting, I mean, we even received a letter from our counterpart in the fiberglass industry, basically signaling that they are nervous about our environmental benefits. We're excited that Timber HP is going to be joining as a SEMA member, if not by the end of July, then early August. There's so much hype around Timber HP, and we're excited to have them on board, and also just for their initial their additional support of cellulosic materials. Then I guess just last thing, I've heard a few people, talking about conducting case studies. If there's anything that you need for a wall assembly, or an attic or something of that nature, and you're looking for cellulose, then please get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that you get some product at no charge. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Rachel, for introducing us to SEMA. Natalie Douglas from the city of Nelson, you know, in British Columbia, just north, not that too far from Seattle, actually. And Natalie, my sense is that a relatively small town in Canada is really on the leading edge of embodied carbon action on the local level. Could you please tell us a little bit more about what's happening in the city of Nelson?
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. I'll just share my screen here. Like so many folks on the call, we've brought up Chris Magwood multiple times. And they were Builders for Climate Action, and Chris were very much a part of us starting off our work here in Nelson. So back in 2021, a lot of our work has focused on getting an average for our community here in the Kootenays, and then educating folks. You guys might have seen the Material Carbon Emissions Guide that we published with Builders for Climate Action. That was a key piece of one of our early deliverables. It's kind of transitioned now into testing and figuring out, we have these conclusions, we have this data, what do we actually do with it? So we've been engaging with our community. Again, we're a population of around 19,000 or so folks, so quite small, but a very active and progressive building community. And so we have a very active embodied carbon advisory group. We are offering free embodied carbon consultations, and kind of transitioning into what we're doing now, I wanted to highlight four main things that I thought would be relevant to this group. The first one being, we're developing kind of a regulation plan. We're a small community. We recognize that we can't do what City of Toronto or City of Vancouver can do necessarily. There is not quite the appetite. There's a lot going on in the operational emission spheres, so we have to be very cognizant of that and align what we're doing in the embodied world with that. And so we're going to try to see how we can transition from an award-based system, kind of introduce a point system, and then transition into eventually requiring maybe whole building life cycle assessments. But that will probably come out within, sometime in the fall. On the embodied carbon advisory group front, we've had a real success with having a local concrete pouring company join our advisory group, and they've been such great advocates to our concrete mix facility, that the mix facility is actually going to be offering the higher fly ash mix at the same cost as the more traditional mix. And they've been large advocates, and it was just a bunch of things coming together at the right time. Lafarge taking a lot of steps that has resulted in this change, but we're feeling a lot of momentum here in the Kootenays. This is just, good practice. It's no longer just some folks who are advocating for this. This is just good practice. We know how to use this stuff. And that's been a massive win in our community. The concrete pouring company also is creating their own low carbon policy. I'm not leading this. This is just on their accord. So if you want any, tips or tricks, or want to talk more about how that came to be, please do reach out. I can throw my email in the chat. On the free embodied carbon consultations at the City of Nelson, we are offering all folks who are applying for building permits, whether that's renovation, it can be tiny or large, and anyone can access a free embodied carbon consultation where we will offer them a 1-hour session with an embodied carbon specialist and talk through what material substitutions, what design changes they can make that will reduce their embodied carbon. That has seen a decent amount of success. We've gotten actually a lot more interest from regional players because we've been doing this work for 2 years in Nelson. So a lot of the folks in Nelson actually know about this stuff now, but I will really assert that it's been really interesting to see, this might just be a bathroom renovation. Why would we offer them a free embodied carbon analysis and consultation? Well, they're planning to build a house in 2 years or something, or they own a company that actually works a lot with building materials, so I think that has been a really interesting process to gather data and educate our community, both, homeowners as well as the building community itself. And then finally, something I think that a lot of folks are increasingly investigating is that retrofits piece. We get a lot of questions about whether someone should do a deep energy retrofit or if it actually is contributing more embodied carbon. And so we've been doing some preliminary investigation just in our own local context. Again, just to preface all of this work, we tend to focus all of our research on Part 9 builds, but because we don't do as many large building projects here, but in the regulation piece, we will address part 3 or larger buildings. For the retrofit side, though, again, this is just preliminary investigation, and I will advocate for anyone on the call who gives money to projects, please throw more money into this world, because there is a lot of work being done on, retrofitting buildings, and we just want to take this opportunity to do it well. So we're trying to work on it, but if anyone has ideas or connections, again, we're a small municipality in Canada. It might not be relevant for all the folks on the call from the US, but if you want to talk about this, please do reach out. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, Natalie, I'd say that everything you just said is happening in Nelson is absolutely applicable to almost any city of any size. And so what I'm thinking is that it would be really great to get a case study of what's happened in Nelson and the lessons that you've learned, the experiences that you've had, the relationship between driving policy change and public awareness, and then the proactive role that the government has played in consulting with and advising on low carbon building projects. So sounds like the kind of thing that would very well complement the driving action paper from RMI, as well as something that I'd love to highlight on the CLF website as well. So maybe you and I should follow up on that idea and think about a possible essay from you about that.
Sounds great.
So next on my list is Jessica Bristow from ILFI, and I know you've got a lot to share as well. So please take it away, Jessica.
Everyone, yes, I have a few things to share. I'll keep it a little brief because we're getting a little tight on time, close on the end here, and some of my items on the list tied to the Energy or Embodied Carbon Coalition group that ILFI is also a part of. So hi everyone, my name is Jessica Bristow. I am with ILFI, focusing on our zero energy, zero carbon, and LBC programs. We've had a very busy spring. We had a really great Living Future conference in DC in May, which is why I missed this meeting that was on May 3rd. At that conference, we had a really great equitable decarbonization workshop that we ran. We've also just in early June, mid-June, had our Affordable Housing Summit. And that was a really great event in which we did cover embodied carbon and how it can relate to and help to improve the affordable housing pilot projects that we have at ILFI. And then I also did have on this list to discuss the Embodied Carbon Coalition efforts, and to follow up on what Megan was mentioning too. She and I and Building Transparency was speaking about this a bit at Greenbuild. So we'll all be there and discussing where it's at that point. Really excited about that. We're also at ILFI entering our second cycle of our technical advisory group sessions cycles. So if anyone is interested in applying to be on our technical advisory groups, the applications will open shortly. And we do have a specific energy and carbon tag. It's been a really fun and great group to have at ILFI. CLF is part of that, as are a few others on the call as well. Also, just as I mentioned it, I think back in January, but it's been a while. We are in the midst of an alignment update across all of ILFI's ZE, ZC, and Energy Pedal programs. So we're working to gather alignment. They'll be releasing updates at the beginning of next year in that regard, with LBC 5.0 to follow the next year. And on that note, for any of you who are familiar with ILFI or have worked on LBC projects, we do have a survey that I'll put a link in the chat once I log off, of a visioning for LBC 5.0. And I think especially with the expertise we have here in embodied carbon, you don't have to answer all the questions if you want to skip to energy pedal context and content. Any feedback you want to give on that, of how ILFI can really keep the leading edge and very forward-thinking approaches within our energy programs. Any feedback and advice is welcome for that. I think that's all I have for now. And yeah, this is a great group. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jessica. And now we've got Lauren Kubiak from NRDC. Take it away, Lauren.
Thanks. Yeah, so we've been very focused on public procurement of concrete in California. and we're sponsoring a bill, AB 1250, to address that. As you may know, concrete is not included in California's Buy Clean policy, and previous attempts to pass legislation to add concrete to Buy Clean have failed. There's a lot of opposition from the general contractors in California. So this year, with our bill AB 1250, we're taking a bit of a more measured approach. So AB 1250 would require Caltrans to require environmental product declarations for concrete and asphalt used in state transportation infrastructure projects, and would also require Caltrans to draft model bid specification language that they may adopt at some point in the future that requires those materials to meet that GWP benchmark. But right now, it would just require EPD collections in the model spec with the hope that Caltrans would then implement that in the future. So that passed the Assembly last month, and it passed the Senate Transportation Committee yesterday, and it's coming up in the Appropriations Committee after summer recess. So if anybody is interested in supporting this legislation, that would be much appreciated, because California has a $30 billion budget deficit, and so it's facing some budget headwinds this year. But I think we're optimistic. I think Caltrans is generally supportive, and we've been working closely with industry to make some amendments to address their concerns. So optimistic, but would love any help that people want to give. And I can pop a link to the bill and my email address in the chat. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. That's in the face of headwinds, that feels like real progress. So I'm especially happy to hear about that partnership. Eric Finley from NSF, would you please tell us who you are? Tell us a little bit about NSF and about your programs related to embodied carbon.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for having me on, and happy to be here. It's our first meeting, so I just wanted to give a little bit of brief introduction to NSF in case some aren't aware of that. We have a couple colleagues on the call as well, Amy and Sarah, and just wanted to kind of go over NSF a little bit, and just so we can get a better understanding of what we can offer from an embodied carbon point of view as well. So first and foremost, though, NSF overall, we're is an independent and not-for-profit, non-governmental public health and safety organization. We started in the 1940s, helping really bring standards and regulations and consumers together through various different types of certifications, different types of standard development, all around health and safety. And we've since expanded from there and really dived into a lot of different areas. Some of those key focuses have been food and health safety, the health sciences, consumers, water quality products, a lot of different types of industries where we're spread out across in different types of sectors, I would say, and as well as a global reach. We're located in about 53 different offices and labs where we do different testing on different types of products, all focused on planet health and safety. But to get specifically to the main point of why, how we help embodied carbon, we've at NSF, we have quite a few standards for sustainability, product specific standards in the building industry. And a lot of these standards go across multi-attributes, really focusing on environmental, social, government type processes within those types of certifications, as well as requiring some specific, LCA, EPD type attributes to gain points in those standards. So a lot of those push the industry and kind of push those different types of building products when trying to achieve these certifications to really understand their embodied carbon and find ways to reduce that. Additionally, for that, we're a program operator for PCRs as well as EPD verifications. So you can see some of those, some of these product level certifications here. This is a list of all of our sustainability certifications, but the two I'm specifically talking about is our EPD department and then building product certifications. So a lot of these help support these embodied carbon industries. That's really the the IRA is focusing on and trying to reduce embodied carbon. Along with this, we have a consulting department that also focuses on calculating GHG emissions from scope 1, 2, and 3, looking at a lot of different ways of helping clients with LCAs, looking at circularity models, helping certain larger known brands with circularity standards. So really helping to dive down into that and to really determine how we can influence products from a production level of reducing that carbon output. And furthermore, as I said before, we're a program operator. So we have a standards department, a consulting department, and then EPD verification department that all works together to help provide companies across a large service arc here for EPDs, developing EPDs, calculating LCAs, going through the whole process, developing PCRs, really supporting the industry from a whole, from all three sides. So thank you for your time here, and yeah, I appreciate it, and looking forward to more conversations.
Thanks much, Eric, and very welcome to NSF for being part of the conversation this morning, and then going on into the future. And then finally, Webley Bowles from the New Buildings Institute is on the line. Delighted that you could join us this morning, Webley. And could you tell us a little bit about what's going on with NBI?
Sure. I look forward to seeing the recordings. I missed the first half. I am a little bit blurry here today. Hopefully that will come into focus. I'm Webley Bowles with New Buildings Institute, Associate Director of Codes and Policy. We are planning to publish our Embodied Carbon Building Code overlay soon. It's in formatting. It's kind of out of my control for the timing, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be doing some promotion around that. Also want to share, I'm not sure if how many other jurisdictions policies and plans have been shared at this point, but I'll just say a couple of things here quickly. So ASHRAE 189.1 voted to include EPD requirement in the next version. So we're really excited about that to go forward. We're still waiting to know about the product GWP limits within that standard as well. So hopefully we'll get that approved for the next version. So there will be a procurement portion within 189.1, which becomes the green code. So that's exciting to have that would require whole building LCA and this procurement process as well. And we're working with a couple of different jurisdictions on embodied carbon codes. City of Seattle is starting a working group to discuss including concrete and steel in their proposals. I believe those are starting this month, but I don't have the exact dates. CalGreen has a couple of embodied carbon proposals, and there's a public hearing on August 1st through 3rd, and we are looking for more people to speak up. So if you work or live in California, we would love to have you speak at those. So feel free to get in contact with me. Also, we are planning to develop some resources around that when that is passed. So we'll develop tools, resources, and some training materials to support that effort. LA is working on embodied carbon ordinance. Not sure if that's been mentioned yet. And then we're also, NBI is working on a couple of webinars in the fall. And if anybody else has any embodied carbon webinars in the fall, we would love to coordinate with you so we are not overlapping. How is that for a 2-minute update?
That was amazing. That was absolutely perfect. And Webley, you were the concluding and supreme close to the meeting. So thank you very much for being here, even if you attended late. And we will have the complete video recording available shortly after the meeting. I also was extremely happy to hear about the progress on this from the point of view of the city of Seattle, because that's my hometown here. And I know that there are a number of other organizations that have been part of the NGO Roundtable that have been part of that as well, including Building Transparency and the CLF and others. So, but the leadership specifically of NBI on that project has been really invaluable. So I'm really happy that you've been part of it. And that concludes this morning's meeting. We've had, I think, a total of 24 reports from different organizations. Lots of exciting things are taking place. It also brings to mind for me that the next meeting of the NGO and Government Roundtable on Embodied Carbon will be in October, and that will be the 4th anniversary of this gathering. So we'll have a little celebration of some kind. We'll all bring our kazoos or something like that, or juggle scarves, something interesting we'll all do together. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here this morning, and we'll be sending out the notes, including all of the links that you all put in the chat windows, and a link to the video recording as well. And we'll see you all very soon. Thanks a lot, and have a great summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.